Here we are. We're in the metaverse, but we're not in the metaverse. We're on Zoom. I'm so very, very proud to present this next session. It's our opening keynote for the Mesaverse, introducing the Mesaverse, and we're so excited to have. He's the futurist in residence for Viacom CBS, Ted Schilowitz. Ted, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Sinan. It's been fun to join this with you and build a couple of different avatars of myself, one that looks a little like me and one that's a little more aspirational as me as some sort of like, bodyguard of the future kind of thing. Age myself a little bit, which is kind of fun.
I love it. And joining you is Sinan El-Rubaii. Sinan, it's so great to see you. And thank you, ICBR, for supporting this event. Obviously, you have a vested interest in the metaverse. You also have a great relationship with Ted, so we have that mutual friend. And I just, when you came to me with the idea of saying, hey, what if we had Ted present in the first metaverse event? I was like, who better to present to Hollywood about the metaverse than Ted Schilowitz? Ted, you've had a few years under your belt of doing some deep explorations. And this isn't just about making movies. I think this is about, or television or content. I think this is also about collaboration and new ways to work, considering the challenges of the pandemic and where we're going to be in a post-pandemic society, which still hasn't even really been told. So I was just excited to turn this tool on to you and have you come in and really talk about the bigger picture as it relates to this kind of new experience, because many people, this is their first real day in the metaverse that they're spending more than 10 or 15 minutes. So what a great way to kick off the show. And again, thank you so much. I'll be in the background, so feel free to ask me questions and whatnot, but I'm just excited to be a fly on the wall, listen to this amazing conversation.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. It looks like I've got restless knee syndrome in my avatar too. It's kind of fun. But I think, you brought up a point that's really interesting about people's first moment in the metaverse, right? Their first day in the metaverse. And I've now made this point sort of philosophically across my work life and the people that I've been interfacing with largely remotely over the last couple of years, just like we all have across the planet, that the metaverse is a nice crystallized word that allows us to find a place to start from. But when you think about what's really been going on with technology over the last few generations now, let's call it 40-ish plus years, a little over 40 years, we have been building our way to this interconnected world using technology and using technology tools to allow things like video chat to become ubiquitous, texting, email, and being able to share information across social networks and all the pros and cons and all the baggage of that. The raw technology that has been developed to allow this to happen and make this viable, extraordinarily cost-effective and useful across an entire spectrum of industries and an entire spectrum of life, right? From just the sort of productivity side of your life, the social side of your life, the friend side of your life, if you're on the gaming and interactive side of your life, the entertainment side of your life, and more of the passive entertainment, how we watch things. The metaverse as a word obviously comes from a science fiction book of an author I know well. I'm friends with him, Neal Stephenson, who wrote a book called Snow Crash, which he wrote a lot of other books too. Another book called Diamond Age, which I highly recommend. It's extraordinary. But he came up with that word to define this sort of multi-connected universe where people are doing what we all had to do. The forcing agent of the pandemic sort of brought us into this world. Now, people like you guys, Sinan, and me, were already in many instances of this pre-pandemic, right? We were living in these worlds and experimenting with the ideas of what connected communication could be on what we refer to as traditional screens, computer screens, laptops, mobile phones, and advanced always-on spatial screens like virtual reality devices and mixed reality devices. And just wait till you see what's coming for the broad stroke of people, which the three of us certainly have experimented with in terms of spatial meetings and spatial connectivity, where we actually feel like we're in a space together, right? Today, we're using a two-dimensional video version. This is very largely accepted around the world. The new thing that's coming and starting to crack the code in terms of consumerization is what happens beyond this type of screen when we actually start to feel like it's really happening to us. And if I make a reference to our Viacom CBS universe and our Paramount universe, this starts to become the understanding of how do we get to the holodeck in the world of Star Trek. And in some ways we're there right now. We're sort of getting there. So it's interesting as I sort of hop out the chair there for a second, and I'll hop back on the chair there just from a different point of view.
Well, you also brought up first, Ted, and I this harkens back to your first email, your first text. Now,
Yes.
Think of the medium that you did your first email in, and it wasn't just like you got mail, right? That was another, people at DARPA had been, emailing for ages, right? But think of that mass, like You've Got Mail was the first mass, like, oh, hey, email, this is a big deal. It became a cultural icon, right? And think of that text, that first text on your handheld where you were typing, one letter at a time, pressing 3 times for the letter C and the 3 times for the letter H, whatever it ended up being. And I always look at it like, we gave ourselves the toe in the water. Like, I remember your first business email, your first business text. It's like that melding of technology in our life is something that takes time. And that's the other part where I was like, I wanted to start this off, not knowing how quickly everybody would adopt, but just to get the ball going. And I think I'm honored to be like, oh yeah, my first metaverse experience was in the Mesaverse.
Yeah.
That's the other part where it's like, let's be tip of the spear and let's lead into the future, because we're all exhausted on the Zoom. We're all on it all day long. And that's the other evolutionary part of like, how do we spend more time together digitally where it feels more natural? And that's the other thing that the metaverse just drew me to, because I was trying to create a physical event in the digital world. And it seems like the next evolutionary step. Hence my working with Rendezvous, and also hence working with somebody like ICBR on virtual production, because it seems like those worlds are also just melding all at the same time, because that's like a mini metaverse too.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna get out of here and let you guys talk. Please come back and refer to me. And I'm here and I'm listening. But I'm really excited to just be a fly on the wall for you guys to chit chat.
Thank you, Guy, for hosting us. Really appreciate it. And you and Ted, Ted, thank you very much. I know, we took some time out of your super busy schedule. Really appreciate it. It's always amazing talking to you. And people love hearing it from you because, you're one of the best storytellers, at least I've ever known in my life. So you and Guy, like with the intro, touched up on really interesting points. You started like in a really great way, like with what the metaverse is, because, it's the trending word right now. So many articles, so many interviews, so many different things. And we see a lot of different descriptions and definitions for what that word is, right?
Yeah.
Like we see a lot of people that associated with Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft and generally video games, right? We see other people who are like, but what about our video chat tools? Like, is that considered metaverse? And we see others who are creating all these immersive experiences, right? Like with AR and VR and MR.
Yep.
And does that count? And so we see all these things. So, to simplify this in a very, very simple couple sentences for people who are trying to wrap their brain around it, how would you define it?
Well, I think it's all of the above, right? I think that the beauty of something like this is that you can't define it and you can't really put limitations on it. It is going to evolve and grow just like any other technology. And this guy was referring to, the first time you signed on to AOL, I remember the first time I signed on to CompuServe, which is what I had before AOL, right? And how that has evolved over sort of generations and generations of tech stack being built, and an understanding of where business opportunities exist, social opportunities exist, entertainment opportunities exist. And you start to sort of grow this thing into something that becomes way more valuable than the sum of its parts, right? And having a word that we can refer to that gives us an understanding of the sum of its parts gives us the opportunity to do many, many, many things. Almost like in the United States, we have this interstate highway system, right? That was a dream at one point in the political landscape, X amount of years ago. And someone said, we should start thinking about how we connect all of these cities in the United States and allow people to travel easily. And that became effectively the new United States, right? And it was largely formed by the ability to have an interstate highway system. And then of course, other forms of travel, air travel and so forth, dropped on top of that, which is sort of like what the metaverse does, is you build it in a certain place. We see what Epic Games is doing. We see what a lot of the web companies are doing. We see what a lot of the entertainment companies are doing. And we see what the social media companies are doing. And they're all combining and finding ways to kind of layer on top of each other. And that starts to actually define this idea of the metaverse, that it should be, by its nature and by its essence, transportable. You should be able to move from place to place, just like if you own more than one computer these days, you can open that up and you can log into your credentials, and you essentially have a duplicate of your computer in multiple places, right? And your phone is a duplicate of your desktop computer or your tablet, right? The understanding of where we're going with the metaverse allows that as well, but it's one step further, because we start to build a unique presence using our physical body in some cases, and in some cases people will go more fantastical, right? We built 2 different metaverse avatars of me today in just 5 minutes before we started this talk today, and we could swap them out, like if you wanted to at some point, right? So this is all sort of interesting, and ways that my role at a large media company is tasked with trying to figure out where do we fit into this equation.
That's actually a great point and a great segue to the next part. So, you had mentioned, I love the example you mentioned of, okay, so we have all these different parts. How do we group them together and create something that is more meaningful and powerful than than just these parts individually? Which also reminds me, for example, since our topic today is around the media entertainment industry, what Netflix did, for example, right? Taking all that content and movies and shows, and live streaming instead of DVDs, and well, let's all live stream it, and you have access to this content wherever you are on this planet, as long as you have internet access. And it kind of revolutionized like the way content distribution, and in that end.
Right.
Now, so it seems like the media entertainment industry is always on this constant revolution, trying to catch the next cycle. But correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like this is one of the biggest transformations that this industry is witnessing or about to witness. And it's kind of like, if you look at from the content production side, the whole rise of virtual production methodologies and tools. And then on the other end, how these media entertainment companies basically interact with their audiences, how they distribute their content, how do they monetize it, how do they, because it used to be traditionally theme parks and theaters, and then retail shops and merch. But how is that now evolving? And through the metaverse concept. But here what we see is there's one core technology in both ends, which is game engine.
Yeah.
The real-time game engines. So we see that one concept kind of taken over and combined with the pandemic, obviously, and the need to reach larger number of people in a different way. So this change is happening. And as a futures of Viacom CBS, I mean, what are your visions on this? Like, where do you see this going? And especially if we look at it short-term or long-term, right? Like short-term, like 3-5 years, and then longer term, maybe 6 to 9 years. How do you see this movement?
Yeah, and well, you touched on a couple of interesting things there, right? And I think you mentioned that this moment may be kind of this really, really big shift that's happening now. And I'll offer a slightly contrarian view to that. I think that this, just like any sort of forward progress as we do within the technology world, is a slow and steady continual evolution that has been built over many, many years and many, many layers of understanding the capabilities of technology, right? The fact that we're just so seamlessly doing this using Zoom and Rendezvous simultaneously on your computer and my computer, and we have different cut points, and I moved my screens around as you were talking so I could see the metaverse version and the Zoom version so I could communicate with you easily, just shows you how, like, that doesn't just happen overnight, this sort of like interoperability of all this stuff and the ability to just do this so seamlessly, right? So I don't think anything I always take a long view of things, because I don't actually think anything happens quickly. I think there are moments in time where people that don't track it closely feel like it's suddenly happening all of a sudden. But those that track this stuff closely know that this is a constant sort of movement forward as to where the technology goes. And it all sort of connects together. There's this connective tissue. So like a big part of your life and a big part of my life is looking at, the advent of what I call process photography or process cinematography, right? We're using these very advanced LED walls, these high density LED walls that can be tracked in three-dimensional space with a game engine, and the camera can track. And suddenly you're actually taking real locations that would feel like they're filmed in the real place and artificially recreating that in a way that is completely sort of illusion, like the illusion is so strong that most of the audience would never even know you didn't actually go out to the desert to film it, or go even to a place like, another planet to film it, right? It's getting that good. So when we start to talk about how people want to interface with their technology, you just start to build more and more comfort with it. And that's what we're doing right now. That's what you're showing to your audience, because largely this audience will all have different levels of comfort. But over the past 2 years, they've all had to become video chat savvy. You can't, work without it, right? And then you start to think about, well, what do I do beyond that? What do I do beyond just looking at, people's video on a two-dimensional plane in the screen? Can I enter a three-dimensional world? And what can I learn from the gaming culture and the gaming community that has already largely entered three-dimensional worlds, and kids are spending time together, not in a two-dimensional plane, but in a three-dimensional plane inside a game engine, right? And built multiple avatars and multiple instances of themselves. And then you start to see what we would refer to largely as traditional entertainment metaphors dropping into that. So you start to see concerts showing up inside these spatial digital, avatar universes, like a Fortnite, for example, right? You start to see movie premieres, you start to see social gatherings, and that's what Guy is working on the Mesa side. Is, it's largely a group of people from the entertainment industries that need to gather in ways and also want to learn where things are headed. So he was smart enough to say, maybe I should build my own instance of the metaverse, link you guys together, and you started building it. And that's what you have to create to show to people now, and which you'll show them throughout the week.
Yeah, and you hit on a very key point, at least in my opinion. It's one of the main pillars of the metaverse, of the concept of the metaverse, which is interoperability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because without it, you're building silos, and it just kind of defeats the concept and the purpose of the metaverse. So, however, it's easier said than done. And once you go and basically say, well, Facebook Horizon, Roblox, Manicore, Fortnite, and so on, and Spatial and Rendezvous, and all these different platforms, and the hundreds and thousands that will come afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Interconnecting these in one ecosystem that is universal, that would allow basically the end users, regardless of their level of tech savviness, right,
Mm-hmm.
to access, interact, and jump from one portal, one world to another, right? I mean, it sounds like easy because, yeah, I can go to a website now, log in with my Google account, and it just links to everything, and there you go, it works. Right. So why can't I do it here? But in the media entertainment industry, we understand that we're dealing with IP, and we're dealing with content, and we're dealing with a lot of security protocols.
Yes.
How do you see that ecosystem functioning? And I know that, from your day-to-day in Viacom CBS, that's something you're working on.
Yeah.
How are you approaching that?
Yeah. So it obviously it's a very interesting and time-consuming topic that we talk about and constantly are working on. But I guess the way I would position it is largely a battlefield right now, right? It is a battlefield of the philosophy of the open, transportable, next generation internet, the Web 3.0. If today what we're doing in largely websites and hyperlinks is Web 2.0, we move to the next step, right? And it's a battle between the desire of corporations and individuals to find an open sort of standard and an open way to move from place to place, and the practicality and the functional, profitable dynamics of how do you run a company, keep the lights on, have the employees work on all this, and find ways to generate revenue and profit within your world, as well as be able to allow others to enter. And it's always been a constant battle. It's, with whatever technology we work on, let's go all the way back to the telegraph or the telephone, and, ideas that it sure would make a lot of sense to be able to connect all these networks together, right? But every company needs to profit from it. But if we look at the way mobile phones work now, if if I'm on Verizon, you're on AT&T, and Guy is on T-Mobile, we can all call each other, we can all text each other, and all three of those companies are making money on each of us in different ways, right? So if you use that metaphor and sort of link it to the idea that Epic Games and Apple and Google and Amazon and all the big entertainment companies, us and, and the Viacom CBS side and Disney and Universal and so forth and so on, will find ways to allow people to move from place to place and connect from place to place, but still be able to generate proper and logical sort of revenue goals and goal sets. It's just, you're going to battle it out. We're going to find our way to it.
What I heard from you that it is truly complex. However, there is always a way around it. Finding the right partnerships and agreements, right? Which is part of what's needed for the metaverse. A set of regulations and rules for people to follow, and kind of guide of what to do and what to do. Now, one of the things I'm gonna approach this as a fan, as a video gamer. For the ease of my experience, and for me to spend 12 hours a day playing games on the weekends. Like for me, one of the main things that will absolutely push me to do that is I don't even think about it. I launch my console, and then immediately log in with my thing.
Correct.
With my account, and I have all my games that I purchased throughout so many years sitting on my cloud account. I just download whatever and I play it, or buy new ones, and then play with all these people all over the world, right? So that idea, and with Steam, for example, what they did, they were able to integrate with other publishers and gaming platforms. With one Steam account, you can go now and play, games of multiple different publishers.
Correct.
And that concept of, well, I don't want to have 10 different accounts to go to 10 different virtual worlds and build my avatar 10 different times and build my account 10 different times,
right,
and then talk to people who are completely isolated from each other. I want this one experience. So what do you think of that?
So it's interesting because Guy and I were talking about this in a slightly different vein just a little while ago, and it makes logical sense, right? There are these sign-in portals, right? Google has a sign-in portal, Apple has a sign-in portal, Facebook has a sign-in portal, Sony PlayStation has a sign-in portal, Xbox has a sign-in portal. I could probably give you 10 others that aren't the Steam, obviously you mentioned Steam has a sign-in portal, right? And the logic point of who, how, and when you feel comfortable with that sign-in to kind of be that part of your identity, is how you choose to manage your life's journey these days, right? The question is, can we have a ultimate universal sign-on that everybody in our industry agrees to? I doubt that will ever happen, right? Because everybody wants to have ownership with the customer. So if you're a big PlayStation guy, they want you to sign in with PlayStation credentials. And if you're on Steam all the time and then play your games on a PC, they want you to do that. And if you're an iOS person, they want you to, anytime a website wants you to sign up, they just make it easier than entering an individual email and remembering yet another password. They kind of just give you a master account. But there's a price to pay for that, right? And now you're in their world, you're in their walled garden. They're constantly battling to see what is the right way to manage that. I don't think, certainly in our lifetime, we're ever going to see anything that'll be fundamentally different than these very large tech companies battling for control of the customer. So you as a customer have to be aware that you have to be proactive. You have to choose the sign-ons that you believe represent your ethics and your goals and your desires. And if they're at least doing their best effort to allow you to be somewhat transportable. So we know that Tim Sweeney has talked about this. he wants people to sign in through Epic and be through his Epic store and Epic Games world. But he also is philosophically trying to get people to be able to go to other places, to go to the Roblox world with his avatar. But the Roblox folks might want you to build the master avatar in their world, right? Because then they own you and they can monetize on you differently. So there's not going to be an easy answer to this. This is going to be a continual churn of where the customer goes. And we could talk about, streaming services too, and how you credential into them as well.
Yeah.
In the passive, sort of more traditional media markets as a place to own the customer and maintain that customer relationship. So it's a tricky one.
And that, by the way, presents like that presents another challenge, which each one of these virtual worlds and platforms, it has its own visual identity. They're not identical visually.
Right.
You can go from one that is a high fidelity, whether it's fantastical or photoreal, but it's a more like high fidelity worlds. You have more like Roblox style, more primitive art style, 2D, so it becomes really complex to say, hey, I'm going to take my avatar from Fortnite, drop it on Minecraft. It doesn't really it doesn't fit.
There's a practical challenge to making it work. The philosophy is very smart.
Yeah.
Actual usability and the dynamic way of it actually coming into a functional universe is where all of these companies are going to have challenges. Facebook is going to have challenges, and they already are. Epic is going to have challenges. Unity is going to have challenges. Guy is going to have challenges with Rendezvous. I mean, it's all going to be part of how we figure this out. But the act of discussing it, the act of trying to figure it out will get us closer, right? And people will just determine where they're most comfortable and what they like to do. And it's a great big world out there with lots of different people, lots of different personalities doing different things. It's kind of amazing how interoperable our planet actually is today, with all the walled gardens and our understanding that these walled gardens have to exist for certain reasons. But we can all be on different mobile providers and effectively cross communicate. We can all be on something like WhatsApp together or WeChat together and cross communicate. And you cut out the fact that we're not actually paying for phone calls anymore, because we're all, like, if I'm in China, because I go to China a lot, we're all on WeChat, right? And that's how we're going to communicate. So we're no longer but we're still paying a data service, right? We're still paying someone for something.
Somewhere.
Where it all breaks down.
Well, Sinan, thank you so much for arranging this. And I look forward to your session later on virtual productions. That's what we're heading into, is the breakouts after our next panel. Ted, thank you for taking the time with us and also sharing your knowledge. And look, we're starting slow over here at Mesa. I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're going to do every hybrid event next year with Rendezvous. Just so that we have a balance between the FOMO of being in person and having a virtual experience. So that's what and this goes not just for our events that are global, right? So our London events and our Amsterdam event as well, but also committee meetings and working groups and board meetings, because it's that comfortness in business that we're trying to go for. And it's not a force, because we're going to offer Zoom options, and we're going to ease people into it voluntarily, but we're at least starting, and we're starting to kind of plow the road on the business metaverse side, and just appreciate you being here and giving your time to us to kick it all off with this introduction to the Mesaverse. So thank you.